We like to think that hard work is the same as productive work, but deep down, we know that's not true. I once knew a man named Daniel, a brilliant architect who could design buildings that felt like poetry. Yet every day in his office looked the same. A desk covered in half-drawn blueprints, a dozen tabs open on his computer, and a constant stream of urgent messages pulling his attention in every direction. He would start one task, get interrupted by an email, jump to another project, then scroll through industry news because it might be useful later. At the end of the day, he was exhausted but strangely unsatisfied because despite his effort, little actually moved forward. Daniel's problem wasn't a lack of talent or dedication. It was a quiet army of bad habits that stole his focus, one moment at a time. He let urgency replace importance, let distraction masquerade as research, and mistook busyness for progress. The turning point came when a major client dropped him after repeated missed milestones. That night, frustrated and questioning everything, Daniel came across a line from Epictetus: "No great thing is created suddenly." He realized he had been treating his work like a series of small emergencies, instead of an intentional craft built one deliberate block at a time. It hit him he had been working as if his days were infinite, when in truth each wasted hour was a brick missing from the life he wanted to build. From that moment, he decided to strip away the noise, cut the bad habits, and work with the calm precision of a Stoic, not chasing everything, but focusing on the few things that truly mattered. Daniel's days followed a pattern so familiar that he could predict it without looking at the clock. Morning coffee in hand, he would sit at his desk with the intention of tackling his most important design project. But before the first line was drawn, an email ping would pull his attention to a client request that just needed a quick reply. That reply would lead to another email, then a chat message from a colleague asking for feedback on something unrelated. By the time Daniel looked up, 2 hours had passed, and his main work hadn't even begun. It wasn't laziness. In fact, Daniel often worked late into the night, chasing deadlines that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The problem was that his energy was scattered. Every quick check fractured his concentration. Every small decision drained a little more of his willpower, until the big tasks felt like mountains he no longer had the strength to climb. On particularly chaotic days, he would tell himself, "I'll start fresh tomorrow." But tomorrow would arrive, and the cycle would repeat. What Daniel didn't realize was that these bad habits, constant context switching, giving every distraction his immediate attention, filling every spare moment with low-value tasks, were silently robbing him of his deep work capacity. They made him reactive instead of proactive, leaving him in a constant state of mental clutter. The wake-up call came during a meeting with a long-term client. She spoke kindly, but her words cut deep. "Daniel, your ideas are brilliant, but we need someone who can deliver on time. I can't keep waiting." That night, sitting alone in his office, he felt the weight of every half-finished project and every hour he had let slip away. He remembered Epictetus's words: "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." He realized he had been letting his days be shaped by other people's urgencies instead of his own vision. It wasn't just about working harder, it was about working with discipline, clarity, and intention. The next morning, instead of diving into emails, he took a notebook and wrote down the 3 most important things he needed to do. Everything else would have to wait. It was uncomfortable at first, like swimming against a current. But for the first time in months, he ended the day feeling not just busy, but truly accomplished. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control the chaos of the world, but we can control our response to it. For Daniel, this meant accepting that the modern workplace would always be full of emails, pings, sudden requests, and shifting priorities. He could not command the silence of the office or slow the flood of incoming demands. But what he could control, what the Stoics would call what is within our power, was where his attention went first. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In practical terms, this meant that Daniel had to stop letting his environment dictate his priorities. Every time he opened his inbox first thing in the morning, he was essentially handing over the steering wheel of his day to someone else's agenda. The Stoics valued clarity and intentionality because they understood that life is finite. Time once spent cannot be reclaimed. Seneca reminded us, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Daniel realized that his bad habits at work, constant checking, saying yes to every request, prioritizing what felt urgent over what was truly important, were not just harmless quirks. They were daily choices to waste the most precious resource he had. Through the lens of Stoic efficiency, productivity is not about cramming more tasks into the day. It's about aligning every action with a clear purpose. It's about making the distinction between motion and progress. Busy is not the same as effective. Stoicism calls for deliberate focus, to act with reason, not impulse, to hold fast to your chosen priorities even when the world tugs at your sleeve. For Daniel, adopting this mindset meant creating a mental fortress around his deep work hours. During those times, the only tasks allowed were the ones that moved his most important projects forward. The rest could wait. At first, the discomfort was intense. His hands twitched to check messages. His mind whispered reminders of just 5 minutes to clear his inbox. But slowly he began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: control. Not over his entire environment, but over himself. And that, he learned, was enough. There were 3 Stoic-inspired practices that Daniel used to turn his chaotic, reactive days into ones marked by clarity, focus, and progress. The first was what he called the priority anchor. Each morning, before opening his email, before answering a single message, he wrote down the one task that would make the biggest difference if completed that day. It had to be specific, measurable, and directly tied to his most important goals. Not busy work, not maintenance, but something that moved the needle forward. Once chosen, it became his anchor. No matter what noise or request came in, that task was to be worked on first, without exception. Marcus Aurelius reminded us to do every act of your life as though it were the very last. Daniel found that when he treated his anchor task with this level of importance, the rest of the day flowed with more purpose. He wasn't just reacting, he was directing. The second practice was guarded time blocks. Stoics valued structure because it protected them from drifting into distraction. Daniel began to treat his workday as a series of intentional time frames, each assigned to a specific type of work. Mornings were for deep, focused creation. Afternoons for meetings and collaboration. Late afternoons for admin and light tasks. During each block, he gave himself permission to fully ignore tasks outside of that category. If he was in a deep work block, messages could wait. If he was in a collaboration block, he didn't try to draft complex proposals in between. This wasn't rigidity, it was freedom within structure. Seneca would say that without a plan for your day, you are at the mercy of chance, and chance rarely gives you the outcomes you desire. Daniel found that by working with the natural rhythm of his mind, he produced more in fewer hours, and with far less stress. The third practice was what he called the memento mori reset. In the Stoic tradition, memento mori, remember that you will die, is not meant to be morbid, but to sharpen your perspective. Daniel took a few minutes each morning to imagine that the day ahead could be his last. He would ask, if I only had this one day, how would I want to spend my attention? The answer was never by clearing my inbox or refreshing my notifications. It was always about finishing meaningful work, making an impact, and having the space to breathe without the constant tug of urgency. This daily reset cut through the noise. It reminded him that each hour wasted in distraction was an hour stolen from the life he wanted to live. At first, applying these practices wasn't easy. The pull of old habits is strong. Our brains crave the quick wins of checking something off of the list, the instant gratification of responding to a ping, the false comfort of being busy. Daniel stumbled many times, falling back into reactive cycles. But here's where Stoic discipline made all the difference. He didn't judge himself harshly when he slipped. Instead, he returned to his anchor task, re-entered his time block, or asked himself the memento mori question again. Progress, not perfection, was the goal. Over weeks and months, the changes compounded. His colleagues began to notice that he wasn't just getting more done, he was calmer, more reliable, and surprisingly harder to interrupt. It wasn't that he worked longer hours. In fact, he often left earlier than before. The difference was that his hours actually counted. These three practices are deceptively simple, but together they form a shield against the chaos of the modern workplace. They protect you from being swept into everyone else's priorities. They force you to confront the truth that your time is finite and precious. And most importantly, they remind you that productivity is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters most, with the clarity and presence of someone who knows their life is not to be wasted. At the end of the day, productivity is not about squeezing every second until you burn out. It's about choosing where those seconds go so that when your head hits the pillow at night, you know they went to the right places. The Stoics understood something we often forget in our rush to do more. Life is not short because the days are small. It's short because we waste so many of them on the wrong things. You and I don't get to decide how many years we have, but we absolutely get to decide how we use the hours in front of us. The bad habits that rob our workday, constant context switching, checking notifications every 5 minutes, saying yes to everything. These are not just quirks, they're leaks in the vessel of our life, and every day we let them run unchecked, more of our potential drains away. Imagine if you reclaimed even 2 hours of pure, undistracted focus every single day. That's 10 hours a week, 40 hours a month, a full 500 hours a year, time you could spend mastering a skill, building a dream, creating something that will outlast you. But it starts with one choice: to stop letting the urgent drown out the important. The next time your hand reaches for your phone in the middle of deep work, pause and ask, does this serve the work that matters, or is it just stealing my focus? The next time someone tries to pull you into their crisis, remember Epictetus's words: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Guard that power like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. If you're tired of ending the week wondering where your time went, if you're ready to feel the satisfaction of finishing what you start today. Pick your anchor task, block your time, ask the memento mori question. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. This moment is the only one that's guaranteed, and it's in your hands right now.